Hey everyone, welcome back aboard the Earthmote. I'm Randall. If you're anything like me, you love the freedom of a sandbox tabletop role-playing game. No plot on rails, just an open world for your players to travel through and explore. But that freedom for newer groups or newer players can feel a little bit like a double-edged sword, especially at the beginning of a new campaign. Your players can feel a little bit lost. They might find themselves in a town, but just be questioning, now what? What should they be doing? So today I want to talk about a simple yet effective technique to anchor your players in the world right from the start. And that's the idea of introducing an interesting patron and potentially some dangerous rivals of your party. These aren't just quest givers, they're dynamic living NPCs who give your players purpose or challenge them in the case of your rivals, and they really make your world feel alive. So we're going to discuss how we can introduce them into our games, what they do, and how they can drive the action forward in your adventuring sessions without taking your players' agency away and still keeping it a sandbox environment. Let's start with the idea of the patron. Think of the patron as the hand that feeds the adventurers. They're probably a somewhat powerful or wealthy NPC who has a vested interest in the party's success and is willing to pay for their services. A patron gives your players a reason to be a team and sort of a clear starting point for their adventures. At least who could be a patron? Well, like I said, it could be anyone with resources and probably a need for deniable assets. So that could be a nobleman, a wizard, a merchant guild leader, even a criminal underworld boss. They all obviously have their own goals, motivations, and work they need done for them. The key is that the patron has a goal that aligns, at least for now, with the player's goal. Usually early on is getting some sort of wealth and getting a little bit more powerful as they sort of establish themselves and their adventuring career. So let's say your players start in the city of Port Blackwood. On day one, maybe they're approached by Lady Alara, a wealthy but beleaguered noble. She owns a silver mine in the hills, but for weeks, no ore has been delivered to the port city, and she has grown concerned about that. So she offers the party a handsome sum to go and investigate. Just like that, you've given them a starting quest, a direction to point their adventuring in, and a location on the map for them to explore, and a connection to a powerful NPC that they could go back to in the future. But don't just make Lady Alara or your patron a quest dispenser. The patron should have their own goals, their own life. Maybe Lady Alara is a generous employer. She's also in a struggle with a rival family over the silver deposits in the hills. The quest she might give is directly related to that feud, and this makes her feel a little bit more like a real person, not just sort of this vending machine that dispenses quests and gold to the party. Now, you might be worried that the party's going to become too dependent upon their patron. Rather than that kind of sandbox feel, that open world, maybe they're just always turning to that patron for, what to do next. And that kind of becomes a linear storyline rather than sort of a sandbox where they can interact with these NPCs, but they have their own kind of goals and conflicts as well. First, I think focus on how you can make the party's interests overlap with the patrons. Maybe you can layer on other rumors or elements that are related to the patron's quests. So maybe you have a noble that wants a ruin cleared out. Okay, well, maybe the party's heard in the local tavern a local legend about that ruin. Now you're adding a little bit more intrigue to this location and giving the party other reasons about why they might pursue a path along investigating that ruin, but maybe they have a little bit different purposes than their patron's sole reason for sending them there. Secondly, I would say let there be gaps in your patron's requests. You can see this technique used in video games all the time. You get a quest from an NPC, but you're not going to get their second or third quest until later in the game, after your character has gone off and done other things in the meanwhile. You can use that in a tabletop RPG too. Once they solve this problem for her, maybe she doesn't have another issue that needs adventurers for some time until into the future. That way the party is kind of forced to go off and make new connections or do things on their own, but they still have connection to that patron. And if she comes calling later, then they can decide if they want to work with her again or not. Now let's go ahead and talk about the rival. If the patron is sort of the hand that feeds, then the rival is the shadow that looms over the party. This is an NPC or rival faction group that has competing goals or interests with the players, and they're not afraid to get in the way. A rival could be a competing adventuring party, a cult or a gang, or even a cunning monster that is also operating in the same area as the players. Let's go back to our example of the players working for Lady Alara. What if a rival adventuring party, we'll just call them the Black Arrows in this case, are also looking for a lost magical artifact in the same region that the players are, and maybe they're hired by Lady Alara's enemies. Now it's not just a dungeon crawl for the party to go find this item, it's become a race against time. The players might find the Black Arrow's campsite, or maybe they even get ambushed by them but in the wilderness. The rivals' actions create sort of these dynamic problems for the players. If the players are taking too long to go to that silver mine or ruin to find the lost artifact, then maybe the Black Arrows get there first and leave behind a trap or steal the valuable MacGuffin. The players are now reacting to the world. They're not just waiting for the next quest to come along. Again, a little bit of advice on making rivals. I would say make sure they aren't these sort of massive world-ending threats, because then you're kind of getting into those save the world type storylines that really lend themselves more to kind of those narrative story arcs, because the players are going to feel compelled to act against that rival, rather than just sort of being these interests that occasionally glance off one another, clash with one another, and compete with one another. Rivals can be major or minor players in your sandbox, but they should definitely be mortal. And if the players defeat them for good, your sandbox shouldn't grind to a halt because they ruined any plots or ideas that you had planned ahead of time. That's the whole point of the sandbox in the first place. There's no plot. So if these rivals pass, that's okay. There's going to be plenty of other rivals in the game. They will live out their life. They will have their usefulness in your story, and then you can move on from them. So how do patrons and rivals help you facilitate your sandbox world? I think they create what are kind of these fronts or these conflict situations with clear forces in motion that your players can deal with. The patron's needs and the rival's actions create a tension that pulls the players into your sandbox world. Think about it. The patrons are providing hooks. Instead of a blank map, the players now have some ideas about the world. They know there's a silver mine out there. They can go check that out. And they can also create a sense of urgency. Maybe the rival's actions give the players a reason to act now rather than just sort of wander aimlessly throughout the sandbox. Patrons and rivals can also help anchor the world. The players have a home base, maybe that's the patron city, and a reason to return there from time to time if they've made these genuine connections, these allies in that location. And the rivals give them a persistent enemy in that area to contend with. If the players were to leave, then maybe the rivals would take over or cause problems that the players didn't necessarily want to leave behind. And lastly, they do help foster agency. The players can really choose on how they want to deal with these patrons and rivals. In the case of rivals, do they fight them? Do they outsmart them? Or maybe they just even join them. If they're both going after the same artifact, maybe they agree to work together to get it, and then they split the reward however they feel fit from there. The choice is entirely up to them. And again, I do think it's important to reemphasize that you should not let your patrons or rivals become a crutch in the sandbox. They're really there to get the ball rolling and get the story started. Yes, there can be more patrons and rivals that crop up later in the game, but the idea is once the players have established their own goals, their own connections in the world, the influence of these early patrons or any patron that the players explore can wane, or rivals can be defeated. And that makes way for new forces to emerge in the story and areas for the players to explore. And that's really great. It's not sort of this kind of continuous storyline that the players are always going to be involved with these different characters at any given point within the game. So if you're trying out a sandbox game for the first time, or if you're introducing some new players to the sandbox style, maybe try out this simple method. Create a patron, give them a goal, a reason why they would hire the party, create a rival, so give them a competing goal and establish some sort of presence on what they're doing within the region or within the world, and then introduce them early. Don't wait until session 3. Let the players meet them in session 1 and sort of get the ball rolling on adventure. By doing this, you're not planning a plot out. You're really just sort of setting up a dynamic situation. They can solve it how they want, but you are giving your players a push to explore, a reason to care about your world. And then from there, they're going to really create their own adventure as long as you're providing some hooks along the way and some cool locations for them to check out. So let me know what you think. How often do you use patrons and rivals in your own games? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Check out Enchanted Nimbus, my monthly newsletter. Thanks for hopping aboard the Earthmote. I'll see you in the next one.